Hello everyone, I'm Santiago, and today I'm gonna be testing the GTX 1060 3GB, and we'll find out if 3GB of VRAM is still enough, or if it's worth getting the 3GB version of this GPU. So well, for the testing system, I'll be using a Ryzen 3 1200 with a 3.9 GHz overclock, plus 8GB of RAM, dual channel. Excepting on Call of Duty WW2, that one will be using 16GB of RAM, since that game uses a lot of system RAM, even on a GTX 1060 6GB. So well, let's get started, shall we? I'm going to be testing games that gave me high VRAM usage on the GTX 1060 6GB in the past. We start with Resident Evil 7. I'm going to be using 1080p across the whole video. And well, in this game, there is high VRAM usage, as I said a second ago, so texture quality will be on medium instead of high or very high. And I also lowered shadows from very high to high, since they are a huge performance hit and they don't look that much different. And I also turned off shadow cache, which is an option that uses a lot of VRAM as well. And I'm going to be just playing the new DLC, the free DLC called Not a Hero, where you control Chris Redfield and it's more action oriented compared to Resident Evil 7's base game. And well, so far it was running over 60 frames per second all the time. You can see in the top left corner of the video that you have the frame times, which should allow you to see if the game stutters or not, or how it's doing overall. And the VRAM usage, as you can see in the bottom left corner of the video, is 2.7 GB, around that number. So we are good in that front, just because I lower textures and shadow cache, so keep that in mind. So yeah, this is a fantastic experience so far. The gameplay is just fine.
This ought to do it. Please tell me what I'm looking at.
I have no idea. It's something new. Exercise extreme caution. Chris, this new white variation is extremely resilient. Normal ammo isn't going to cut it.
I'm open to suggestions.
You'll need ramrods to stop it from regenerating lost tissue. You're going to have to fall back.
Shadow of War, I'll be doing 1080p. As you can see there, it says 1060 3GB, and I'm going to be using pretty much high settings with textures on high as well, because on ultra, according to the game, it uses more than 7GB of VRAM. So well, I'm going to be just going into a fortress battle. There are a lot of NPCs, a lot going on, and you'll see that I get drops below 60 frames per second, just the GPU at 99%. I could lower some settings and get 60s, but that's not the point of the video. I'm just trying to show you how the game runs overall with just 3GB of VRAM. So well, as you can see here, it uses all my VRAM. We have 3GB used, 0GB free. But I played around an hour of fortress battles and it was just fine. What I saw on the 2GB of VRAM cards, when I was using very high texture quality, for example, higher than it should be, the game just crashed. In this case, that didn't happen here. The game was running just fine all the time. Tested this on the 6GB version of these cards and I was unable to just max out textures. It was going over 6GB, so just high textures in this game seem to be just the sweet spot for less than 8GB of VRAM cards. So yeah, this one runs totally fine.
swine! You honestly think you have a chance of capturing any part of this fortress? I will try to stop laughing long enough to kill you. I like it! Come on, get a little closer and feel the burn!
Disarm him! So fast! I was hoping you'd try to take this fortress. Now I get to tear your heart out myself.
They were within 2. I'll be doing once again 1080p. I will say that on each of the sections of this video. And well, I'm using the highest quality possible, which is ultra settings. And this is not a well optimized game. It's not using the GPU at 100% or even close to that. It's around 50 to 80% usage on all the GPUs I tested, all the CPUs, no matter the CPU I use here. So it's just a problem with the optimization. But as you can see, the VRAM usage is 2.8 gigabytes. But why did I show this game if it wasn't using more than 2.8? Well, that's because this game doesn't have a texture quality option, which is what I get worried about when new games release with this GPU. Imagine there's a new game that it releases, like this one, and you don't have a texture quality option, and the game just uses more than 4 gigs of VRAM, for example, in the future, who knows. That's one of the concerns I would have with this just 3 gigabytes of VRAM frame buffer. So yeah, I would be concerned in this case if you were trying to do 1440p or 4K, but this game doesn't run good anyway, so yeah, it was just to make a point. This doesn't have a texture quality option, and those are the enemies of this GPU, for saying it some way. Hitman Episode 2 Sapienza. Again 1080p, level of detail on high instead of ultra, because it uses quite a bit of CPU. And as you can see, the texture quality will be on normal instead of high. If I try to use high instead of normal, the game will tell me, hey, you have very low VRAM, maybe you want to lower the texture quality. And I did so. And as you will see, it's between 2.4 gigabytes of usage and 2.6, something around that number, which is good. And I tested Sapienza because it's one of the big levels in this game. That's why I show you this one instead of episode 1, for example. And I also used DirectX 11, which I didn't show in the settings menu because it's not present in game. So keep that in mind. In this game you can choose DirectX 11 or DirectX 12. In this case I recommend using DirectX 11 because DirectX 12 uses way more VRAM. I saw that, for example, when I was testing this game on my GTX 1050 Ti, which has 4 GB of VRAM. I put it on high on DirectX 11, it was using around 3.2 GB of VRAM, but when I just used DirectX 12, it was around 4 GB. So yeah, if you're playing Hitman, I recommend you try DirectX 11 instead of DirectX 12, because the X12 uses a lot of VRAM. Well, just keep textures on medium and you'll be fine.
Christ, it's hot. Buongiorno, chef.
You help it! I need help! Psycho!
Hey!
Hey there, get up! Police! Police! Someone call the police! Hey!
PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds 1.0, which is, well, just today it released the full game. This is now out of early access, and I'm going to be using pretty much a mix between medium and high, with anti-aliasing on ultra and view distance on ultra. Textures will be on medium. And well, I tested this one again because it tends to use a lot of VRAM, at least from what I could remember from the past. And I use medium textures, but they don't look that bad at all. And so far it seems that this update made the game run better overall. And well, I'm going to be testing this new map, which is the desert map. And after that I show you just the old map from PUBG, the one that we all know. So you have the two maps, the new one and the old one tested here, and both don't go to the 3 GB of VRAM limit. It's around 2800 MB of usage, which is very close to the limit, but I saw some stutters here and there, so it seems to be just server or CPU related or optimization related. Remember that this game, yeah, it's out of early access, but it still needs a lot of work, but it seems that it's making good progress, which is good to see. Call of Duty World War II, again 1080p, and I'm going to be just using 16 GB of RAM instead of 8 GB. I'll tell you why in a second. I recommend using Pre-T2X resolution on 50%. It gives you way higher performance, and well, it doesn't look that much different despite showing half the pixels in the horizontal axis. And well, on texture resolution I'm going to be using high on all the resolutions of the textures, but I'll be lowering the shadow map resolution from extra to high, so you get a small performance uplift plus less VRAM usage. This game uses more than 8 GB of RAM, even when I tested it on the GTX 1060 6 GB, so keep that in mind. The game uses a lot of RAM and a lot of VRAM, so if you're planning on playing this game, I recommend having more than 8 GB of RAM. But with having more than 8, it should be good enough. As you can see, I'm getting like 9 GB of usage on the system RAM side of things, so keep that in mind. But yeah, so far it runs totally fine.
That's black fire in the distance. We're gonna capture one of their AA guns and bring down those troopers.
MG's in the barn!
Shit! Everyone down! We gotta hit those MGs! I need cases on the left and right! Go, go, go! Got him! Moving in from the northeast! He's taking for cover! We're trying to maneuver! Reloading! Right, keep the line!
Target's on the second floor!
I need that aid kit. Here you go.
Ghost Recon Wildlands, I'll be doing 1080p once again. I extended the FOV to 35%, so I have a wider FOV so I can see more around me. And as you can see, the texture quality will be on high instead of extra. As you can see, there's a VRAM usage bar at the right. And with high textures, it's enough to not go over the 3 gig limit of the VRAM usage. It has a huge map, a lot of detail on all the assets that you see on screen. But with 3 gigs on your GPU, it should be totally fine to use high textures. It still doesn't go to the 3 gig limit. It stays at around 2800 megabytes. So yeah, on this one, I was expecting it to go over the VRAM limit even on high, but that wasn't the case.
Okay, we're cool. Watch for civilians. You don't want to case him. This is a mistake. He's looking for the source. I'm engaging take sniper. You're in trouble. Get down. Grenade, get to cover. Grenade! Frag. Hang in there, I'm coming to you.
What took you so long? Clear. How you guys holding up?
Wolfenstein 2, the new Colossus, 1080p, TSS AA ATX. I lowered shadows to high, and I also lowered image streaming from Uber to high, since that's pretty much the texture quality option, just named differently. And this game used a lot of VRAM on my GTX 1060 6GB when I tested. So when I tested this game on my 1060 6GB, it was using more than 4 gigs. So it had me a little concerned, but once I just lowered textures from Uber to high, it was just fine. The game still looked great, plus it didn't go over the 3 gig limit. As you can see, again 2800 megabytes. And this level I tested was one of the ones that I had some performance issues later down the line, due to the water down there, I think, because that was one of the only places where I dropped below 60 frames per second. And this game uses the Vulkan API. But yeah, the game is very smooth, runs at 60 frames per second. And if you lower a couple extra things, you won't drop below 60 even in the water sections that I showed you. Okay guys, so conclusion time. Yes, I would recommend this GPU. I wasn't expecting to do so, honestly, because I thought games use way more VRAM. I mean, as long as you are fine with lowering textures, you should be fine. For what you could see in this video, I had to lower most of the time to high or medium on all the games I tested. For example, PUBG, medium, and it was close to the VRAM limit, so keep that in mind. The Evil Within 2 was more to show you that, well, some games that are not properly optimized don't usually have a texture quality option. Neo is another game that does that Souls-like game. It doesn't have a texture quality option, but in most games the texture quality option is present, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. And well, other concerns, DirectX 12 and Vulkan, those APIs seem to use more VRAM. When a game allows me to select DirectX 11 on DirectX 12, DirectX 12 usually uses more VRAM, so that's another concern I would have if DirectX 11 stops being mainstream. But again, if you're fine by lowering textures a bit in some of the big games, the performance is great, very close to a GTX 1060 6GB. This is not only half the VRAM, it's also less CUDA cores, but it seems to be 10% less performance, plus you can overclock it anyway, so you can reach a 1060 6GB performance, as long as again you lower the texture quality accordingly. You don't need the dual fan version, you can get the 1060 3GB single fan. Just make sure if you get it from EVGA that is the superclocked version, since that one has better cooling than the other flower coolers that you have around. And also the single fan 1060s have a 6-pin connector instead of an 8-pin connector like I have on the Folded Win Edition. You don't need something like an 8-pin connector to do some good overclock. The 6-pin connector goes just fine with this GPU. I'm going to keep testing this GPU in the future so we can see when 3GB of VRAM stops being enough. But yeah guys, that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching and see you next time.